Thanks for tuning in to Murder News, the true crime cult for the latest breaking news, murder memes, TV reviews, podcast recommendations, and all things spooky. We hope you all enjoyed your first ever Zoomsgiving and had all the turkey or tofurkey your spooky little heart can handle. As always, we want to invite you to come join our true crime cult where every day can be a potato feast as we sit around petting baby goats, watching some forensic files, and discussing our favorite cold cases. I'm television's Aurora Katie.
Hey, it's me, your online murder friend, Angelina. Cults are no fun alone, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell all of your true crime friends to join the commune at murder.news. This is the Week in True Crime. We have a special episode for you today. We are joined by SE Moorhead, the brilliant author of the book Witness X. 14 years ago, the police caged a notorious serial killer who abducted and butchered 2 victims every February. He was safe behind bars, wasn't he? But then another body was discovered, and soon enough, the race is on to catch the real killer. Neuropsychologist Kyra Sullivan fights to use a new technology that accesses the minds of the witnesses, working with the police to uncover the truth. Will Kyra discover the person behind the murders, and if so, at what cost? And how far will she go to ensure justice is served?
If you are as excited to check out Sarah's book as we were, we've included a link to her book in the details below. I binged the audio version of this book in a week, and it's honestly the perfect holiday read. Let's welcome Sarah to the show. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you. We need you to stand up for a second and show our viewers the amazing shirt you're wearing, Buffalo Bills,
Wow.
Silence of the Lambs. That is amazing.
So cool.
Hand lotion. I love it.
Oh my God, where did you find that?
Online, just online. Because I do love
goodness.
Silence of the Lambs, as you'll know by looking at
Of
my
course.
book. There's a little, flavour of it, and it was very influential. So I had to get a good
I could
T-shirt.
see that. That's very cool. Well,
Yeah,
Christmas
yeah.
presents, everyone. Keep that in mind because that's
Yes.
amazing. Well, I love the combination of sci-fi and true crime in your book. It makes for such an interesting genre. And the book takes place about 15 years into the future. That can be kind of tricky since it's easy to imagine that 100 years into the future, we might have, like who knows, like flying self-driving cars or live on another planet. You did a fantastic job of building a world that feels very familiar to what's going on right now, but with a hint of realistic advancements in tracking technology. And honestly, just how technology now is pretty much being used to sell us Amazon products. And there's like this great kind of like throw out to that in your book, which was so clever. What was the process of imagining what life would be like in 15 years, especially what sorts of technological advances there will be in crime solving?
Well, what I wanted to look at is the two ends of the spectrum. So you have human beings who at one level are very, very dark or psychologically disturbed or doing terrible things. And at the other end, you have this brilliance of the human mind where they're creating things and making things that can make life a bit better, a bit more efficient, but also which can be used negatively. Or we don't know the side effects. A lot of technology and a lot of advancements, you don't really know the side effects, do we, until they come into play. So with the future, my big question as an author, the thing that's written on my authorial soul is what if? So, the things that you see now, if you Google, you can see people who are looking at mind reading, sort of head skull caps with all electrodes coming on. And they're trying to design, telepathy machines, or they're trying to design, they've got biochips already. We've got chips that are in everything we've got. Well, what if you took a bank card, took the chip out and just put it under your skin? So that way when you're going through the tube or you can just touch your panel instead of having a card, you're just touching it. Or, what if we could read people's minds? So really, that was the main question, was what if? And when it comes to crime solving, I think it was Plato said, if we were invisible, we'd do anything. And I think that's very true for a lot of people. If you could get away with it, you would do it. Right. So my feelings were, well, if all our memories were accessible and people could see exactly what was going on, then you wouldn't get away with as much, would you? And also, if we all were biochipped, and I think that is a big ethical question that, my son was born just when Madeleine McCann went missing. She was her mum was from Liverpool, and it was a big global story. And you think, oh, my little baby, I need to protect my child, so could I biochip him so I know where he is all the time? Because we would do it with puppies, why shouldn't we do it with people? So I do think these things are going to come into play eventually, and there's going to be massive ethical questions about whether we should do these things. And then if we are chipped, and if scanners are constantly reading our bank cards on us, and I don't know, our DNA or whatever that happens in the future, then none of us will be invisible. People will track us all the time. They can do it with mobile phones anyway. That's a massive thing in policing these days, isn't it? So that's kind of where I was coming from.
Wow, I think it's so fascinating how you do examine things like, as you mentioned, side effects, because it's like a lot of sci-fi stuff that you'll read, like they'll talk about, is this technology a good idea, or like what are the cool things we can achieve with it, or the negative aspects of using it. Like if we have a biochip thing to consider, we would go, oh, but isn't it invasive? Or like, what if we see the wrong information? But a lot of people don't talk about like, how will it physically affect our bodies, or like what lasting effects do we deal with after like using that technology? So that's like a really cool thing to explore.
But you also wonder where we're going to go cybernetically. People are going to have all sorts of computer-based things in our bodies, and prosthetics and whatever. And that's I think, not the next novel, but the next novel I'll be investigating that and having a good look at sort of cybernetics and where we're going to go with humans in that.
As a true crime fan, reading this book, I can tell that you're one of us. I noticed several clear references to real life cases in your writing. Is there any particular cases or killers who inspired you when you wrote the profile of the Mizpah murderer?
I think what I wanted to go in for was the psychology of the killer. So instead of looking at a specific killer, I was looking at whether I was going to pick hedonistic, visionary, a mission killer, or the power and control killers. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to examine one of those instead, and I decided I didn't want to do hedonistic because I'm sick of books where you have beautiful young women who've been murdered and they're naked and it's all been sexual. That's not my cup of tea. When I think about power killers, I get upset because I just really get upset and angry about it. So, for instance, Levi Belfield, he's an English killer.
No.
Oh gosh, he's really, really sadistic and evil. He kills like a lot of little girls, and a mother who was holding a little girl at the time, and her little girl was attacked, but she survived. So he's really, really sadistic, and that's not entertainment for me, and it's not really what I wanted to spend my time thinking about. So instead, I went for the sort of visionary mission killer, somebody who felt like they had to do a certain thing to get what they wanted. And obviously in this book, my killer wants to send angels to his sister to look after his sister because she died young. So not a specific killer, no.
Okay,
cool.
No.
And one of my favorite devices in fiction is an unreliable narrator. And Kyra, who is a neuropsychologist, starts off as being incredibly reliable. She has worked as a criminal profiler. She's super bright and capable. But as the story goes on, the technology she's developed begins to play tricks in her mind, and she begins to lose grasp on whether or not what she's seeing is real. What is it like writing a character that doesn't quite have a grip on reality? And how do you as an author keep tabs on how far you'll let the character slip while still providing enough detail so your audience kind of does know what's really going on?
Well, I think part of writing a novel is trying to get the reader invested and to keep on ramping up the stress. So Kyra's obviously going through a lot of stress in her own life, and that is affecting the way she's seeing things. So as the reader follows her story, they're getting more stressed out as well and wondering, what's real and what's not. And just to have her, I'm not sure if this answers the question, but just to follow Kyra's journey as she goes through these things, and she's trying to hold it together, and she's finding that people she works with, particularly in the police or whatever, are doubting her anyway and doubting her confidence, and she's trying to put up this front of being, as you say, reliable still and accurate. I just think that makes a really good story where we can feel what she feels with her. But the tension of, is she going to get there, is very much a question in our mind. She can't go too mad. She can't lose the plot altogether, because, obviously it's about narrative. And when people lose grip on reality, then the narrative's lost, isn't it? And it would be very difficult to understand what she's doing or where she's going. So there were, instead of having her completely go off the rails, there were just little dips in and out of strange experiences that she was having, and edit just that, really. I have to edit that bit. I don't know, fell off that sentence, sorry.
Cool. No worries. In the book, you explore the side effects of this new tech that the characters are using. Do you think of these side effects as sort of sci-fi's version of ghosts, or more like a virtual PTSD?
Absolutely virtual PTSD to start with. I think reading people's memories, it's you would be also affected by their experiences, because memories and experiences are so closely linked, obviously. So as she reads people's memories, she's actually absorbing their experiences, and that's, for me, sort of scientifically and cerebrally, why she's seeing things from other people's lives. But I grew up in an Irish Catholic household where we talked about death a lot, and we also talked about science a lot, and we also talked about the spiritual a lot. So all those things are just very happy bedfellows for me, and they all go together. So for me, there's also a kind of element that she is having, maybe possibly even spiritual experiences or something, a paranormal. So it's not all just cerebral. Some of it's paranormal for me, particularly towards the end. But the reader can interpret that however they want to.
Excellent. I think that's amazing, because just like, it's really clever to think about how actually being in and experiencing the memories affects you, because of course, like, people working in policing or in law at all, or at all involved in crime and murders, they hear some pretty incredible things, they meet some pretty incredible people, and can't help but be affected by that. But of course, like, hearing a story is another thing completely from seeing it and feeling it. And the way you describe the way people experience these memories through this tech is also like involving all senses. So like,
sure,
you really get a full, yeah.
And it's a holistic approach to a person. A person is not just a brain. They're emotional, they're spiritual, they're physical, and they're cerebral. They've got all those things going on. And I think if you do separate any of those things out, then it can cause a lot of problems for the rest of your organism, if you like. I think so, yeah.
So for the true crime community, there's probably nothing more engaging than learning about the psychology of a serial killer. What is it like getting into the mindset of a serial killer to write his side of the story?
Well, the whole irony is that serial killers don't often feel empathy. And my whole drive when I was examining my killer was really to be empathetic to where he was coming from, because, as I say, he is a visionary or a mission killer. So I wanted to try and understand him and present him as a human being, because, as I said, I think being a serial killer is part of being human. That's part of human experience and part of the spectrum that we're on. So I wanted to try and present him as somebody who had been through a lot and it had affected him. But then not all people who go through a lot turn out serial killers. So I'm kind of got a lot of affection for him in lots of ways, and a lot of empathy for him. I feel a lot of pity for him. But if I met him in real life, that probably would not be reciprocated or understood by him. But again, I don't like necessarily books where victims are objects for the killer. I wanted very much to present these people. And that's really why I did, sort of the younger woman and the older woman, the sort of the different ages of the killer, because of the victims, because I wanted to present the fact that all sorts of people get murdered, male, female, old, young. Yeah. They're not objects necessarily. And, to the killer, they might be, because he has a lot of feelings towards his victims, and there's a lot of respect for some of his victims, and there's a lot of disrespect for other victims. And it was just seeing how I could make that into a narrative, or we could understand what his logic was and why he was doing those things, without making it all just gore and object treating people like objects. So that seemed important to me and how I wanted to present him.
That's awesome, because I hate when, killers are presented as just pure evil, as if they're not a human with a history or any reason they got that way or resorted to that,
Absolutely.
And I mean, originally on the original draft, I'd written him as having a pet cat, and he loved his cat. But it just turned out that we didn't have time to. I didn't have time to get it all in. But look at Dennis Nilsson and his dog Bleep. He loved that dog, and he had great concern for that dog. So nobody is 100% evil. Absolutely not. No.
Right. So in the acknowledgements, you mentioned that your brother has a fascination with true crime. Is he the one who sparked your interest in writing about a serial killer?
Absolutely. His name's Damien as well, like Damien the Omen. Because we grew up in the 80s and we didn't have any internet, and we didn't have TV during the day, and there was a fantastic weekly magazine you could buy called Murder Casebook, and every week when we're about sort of 10 or 11, we'd get this murder, and you'd learn all about a specific serial killer, and they went on like for the whole year, for 52 weeks. So it was always very much a part of my experience. And I think serial killers were kind of big in the 80s, particularly in America, because of the sort of the lack of communication between the states. And so they didn't you got this sense of like, there's loads of serial killers. Well, no, probably not. There's probably just a small handful functioning presently, but we don't realize that they're all the same because we don't understand profiling yet, and we're not communicating. I might be wrong, but I'm just imagining.
No, that's true.
There seemed to be this kind of rise of serial killers at that point in time. And I've been reading about Colin Wilson, and Colin Wilson talks about crime that it kind of follow, and this is partly what I think as well, is that crime follows Maslow's levels of needs. We start years and years ago where people are killing for food, and they're killing for shelter, and then we move up to sort of like Dennis Nilsson, killing for company, or killing because you want to sleep with somebody else's wife, sort of a couple of hundred years ago. And then for me, we seem to be moving up to this self-actualization, where in the 80s, I do think crime sort of developed into, I'm going to commit a crime because I need to become who I am. Red Dragon, I am becoming. Right. And there seems to be some sort of self-actualization. It's almost as though society had moved crimes from the very basic things to sort of trying to become something, and it's become about ego, and it's become about showing you who I am. That's how I see it anyway. And I think so I think the serial killers kind of became really aware of them in the 80s, and then my brother Damien became a forensic scientist in the end.
Very cool.
Yeah, he did a lot of autopsies, but he used to come home sometimes at night, and I'd be sitting having my fish fingers and chips, and he'd be saying, "Oh, this man, he's been dead 3 days. He was lying in the kitchen, and the dog was eating his leg, and blah blah." And you just, and as I say, being part of a scientific household and an Irish Catholic household, where you're talking about death, and you're talking about science, and you're talking about an operation or an autopsy, I think all those things just came together to make me the sort of writer I am, really.
Yeah, it makes sense that thinking on those terms from a young age, as soon as you start thinking about the future and technology that might happen, your mind goes, how will that affect murder? That just what's on your mind.
or not even just murder, just like death, because death is it's just so interesting, isn't it? Yeah. It's so interesting. Are we prolonging life? Are we can we avoid some deaths? Do we think so? And the other thing is, I teach religion in high school, so I've always been just fascinated by the ethical questions that all these things bring up. How do we treat others? How do we treat human beings? What's death about? What happens after death? All the big questions.
Right. And how do you punish someone for committing crime? You do the same thing to them, or what?
Now this is really interesting, Angelina, because I'm writing a new book at the moment, and I'm halfway through it, which is about a psychiatrist who tries to cure psychopathy with synthetic empathy. So again, it's about looking at.
Oh my God, I'm so intrigued.
Yes.
Because I think also the other thing is I have a great frustration with, why can't the world just be nice? And if you look at a lot of people commit crimes, particularly serial killers, and they lack empathy, well, that clearly sort of rings of a cerebral issue that surely somebody could fix at some point. If it's just the way your brain's wired, then surely we could sort that out. So
right, if we can fix other chemical imbalances.
Right.
Why not?
Right.
So that's where this came from. So obviously, because I'm not a psychiatrist or a neurobiologist or neuroscientist, then I decided, well, I'll just make it up. I'll make up a world in which you can fix serial killers with synthetic empathy. But a lot of that book, that book's called An Eye for an Eye, and it's about punishment and how do we punish people, and do you just do to them what they have done to other people, and how effective is that, and the side effects of that.
That is so cool. I can't wait to check that out.
I'll send you a copy as soon as it's done. I'll send
Oh my God, please do.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it's clear you've done a great deal of research. The book feels very authentic, and being somebody that's in true crime, it feels like the police work and everything that you relate to in the book is very accurate. You've noted that writing the book took a lot longer than you had imagined. How long did it take you from research to publishing?
Now, this is a complex question, because to become a writer probably took me about 20 years. If anybody's watching and they want to write a book, start today, because it takes ages.
Yeah.
I think learning how to become a good writer took a long time. I haven't got any formal training, but I read a lot of books and obviously read a lot of fiction, so became that. And then I'd written a book, and I got an agent, but none of the publishers wanted it. Except our publisher said to me, I don't like that book, but I like you. What else have you got? And I went, what about this? And just talked about, just pulled an idea out of my head. And then I would say from that moment till actual publication was about 3 years. Wow. Because, I hadn't really thought about it before I'd told her about it. So I had to think about how I wanted to do it. And then plotting a book and structuring a book is quite complex. It's all well and good having ideas, but you're looking at the two sides of your brain where, like Angelina, I want things organized and structured and in place. And like I imagine you, Aurora, you want things to be, sort of look at the people, look at the characters, look at the little tiny details about it. So you have to have the two things working together. So it was a challenge, yeah.
That sounds like not that long, like 3 years, when you're like, what was I doing 3 years ago? Now suddenly it's 2020, but considering 2020 has been 15 years long, that does suddenly seem like a lot longer time to me.
Although I was kind of lucky because, as I say, working in a secondary school over lockdown, we were at home for 6 months. And it was easy to kind of get a lot of work done in the morning for school, and then have that time. When you're plotting a book, you need time to really just think. And so I was walking my dog and I was having time to think. And so I kind of got a lot of this new book done during that time. So that was kind of a blessing, really.
Awesome.
Amazing. So you talked a little bit about the book that you're currently working on, your upcoming book. Do you have any other projects on the horizon, or anything that you want to share with us that you're working on or just brainstorming about right now?
Well, the next book is, as I've sort of mentioned before, is I want to write a book that's kind of like The Wizard of Oz meets Frankenstein. So you've got sort of 4 people who want to become cybernetically enhanced for some reason, and maybe the doctor's got some nefarious ideas behind how he's going to use those. But my book is out in Canada and the States in March. I think it's in the spring, in March 2021.
Okay.
So even though you can buy it on Kindle, I always like to have a paper copy, as you can see.
Yeah.
I can
absolutely
draw on
something for the bookshelf.
Yeah. Bookshelf, yeah. So that'll be out hopefully. So it'd be nice if people kind of bought that or contacted me. I've got a website, semoorhead.com. It'd be lovely to hear from people. I'm on Twitter at SE Moorhead. It'd just be nice to make contact with people.
Great.
Yeah, we'll sure be watching what you're doing, because we're definitely intrigued by now. So
yes, we're already Twitter friends.
Yay!
Well, if Witness X was made into a TV show or a movie, which fingers crossed, I would love to watch it because I'll bet it's so visually stunning. Who would be your dream cast?
This is so hard. This is such a difficult question because I kind of feel my characters instead of see them, even though I think Witness X is quite a visual book. I think it's easy to see it, isn't it? But I don't see my characters. So I actually don't know, but it was going to be written up for Netflix. The writer I would love is Jed Mercurio. He writes a program called Line of Duty. I don't know if you've heard of it,
Okay.
but he is an actual doctor, and he's a writer as well. He's just a genius. And what he does, which I love, is he writes a character and you absolutely hate them. You think, oh, this is a terrible person. And then he flips it, so you suddenly empathize and understand where they're coming from, and then you really get on their side. And because I don't think I'd be the right person to write it for television or to write it for a film, but instead of a dream actors and actresses, I'd rather have a dream writer.
Get a dream. Yeah, that's amazing.
I love that.
Yeah. Did you visualize anybody when you read it, or you'd have different? I mean, we've got different actors, obviously, in the UK.
A little bit, yeah. I don't know. It's hard to picture for sure because I guess I was thinking on a knowing that you're English, thinking on an English basis anyway. So I would think of English actors, but
do you know David Morrissey? Do you know David Morrissey? He's quite famous over your way. I mean, I can see him as Tom, the detective.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good call.
Kyra likes. And I mean, I love Emily Blunt, but I wonder if she's a little bit too young, because I'm kind of a bit pro-ageist. I'm getting on a bit, so I like older folk, and I think maybe she'd be a wee bit young. I'd look for somebody maybe in their 40s, attractive, intelligent woman in their 40s to sort of to take the part of Kyra. But I don't know.
I love that.
Nice.
Well, Sarah, it's been such a pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. And can you let our viewers know where they can find your book? You already mentioned Twitter, where else they can find you on social media.
So I'm on Twitter, at SE Moorhead. I have a website, semoorhead.com. Witness X is on Amazon, so you can find that. And that's it, really. Just contact me, keep in touch. And I've had such a lovely time at you girls. I would love to go out for a few beers with you guys and talk.
When we're allowed, when we find ourselves there for the Crime Con.
London.
London, it is a date. It is a date. I'll get a nice bottle of Bolly or something. Amazing. And we'll have some fun.
Awesome, let's do it.
Something to look forward to.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much for today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for tuning into This Week in True Crime with Murder News. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below, give us a thumbs up, and tell all of your true crime friends.
Help support Murder News by signing up for our commune at murdermurder.news, and your $5 a month sponsorship helps keep the true crime lights on. It helps us produce our weekly show, and it helps support our amazing writers that keep you up to date with the latest breaking news every day on murdermurder.news. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. See you next week.